Join ForumIAS Academy, trusted by hundreds of toppers, including IAS Rank 1 Shruti Sharma.
Hello and welcome to ForumIAS. Today is 23rd February 2023. Today we are going to see the following articles. Their relevance for prelims and mains examination are given here. You can go through it. Since prelims is nearing, we have chosen many topics which have utmost relevance for prelims. So we'll get into today's discussion. The first article is about IMF's estimate for India. So IMF's chief has said that India will remain as a relative bright spot in the world economy. Why? Because see, India's growth rate in the present fiscal year, that is 2022 to 2023, would be projected to 6.8%. And in the upcoming financial year, that is 2023 to 2024, it would amount to 6.1%. So, among the major economies like US, China, UK, etc., India has the fastest growth rate. Alright, so this is the reason why IMF's chief has said that India will remain as a bright spot. And another reason is that India alone will contribute to 15% of global growth single-handedly. That is also a reason why IMF's chief has called India as a bright spot. Why India has such a stability? Why India is having highest growth rate among the major economies? One is digitization. So because of digitization, if we remember, there was 2016 demonetization, right? After that, we went into digitization. UPI and all came into existence. The internet revolution happened. So this digitization actually helped India from the ill effects of the pandemic. We were able to somehow manage the pandemic because of digitization. And prudent fiscal policy. So prudent fiscal policy means commitment to fiscal consolidation, that is reducing fiscal deficit, right? So that we are balancing out the revenues as well as expenditure. So commitment to reduce the fiscal deficit. This also comes from the FRBM Act. What is FRBM Act? Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act. So this particular act was also amended as per the recommendations of R.K. Singh Committee. Right, so it commits Indian government to reduce the fiscal deficit. That shows the commitment to fiscal consolidation. And while we were also doing fiscal consolidation, there were significant financing for capital investments. There were a lot of schemes by which the government of India gave impetus to large-scale capital investments. And also, COVID played a role of trigger. So it triggered and it also advanced the digitalization, because one thing, it made digitalization necessary, and another thing, it made it possible because of the necessity. So even public support was given to households in the digital mode, like digital tokens for ration shops. These kind of innovative solutions were offered during the pandemic. and there has also been attention to the green economy. So these are all the reasons why India has a stable path. If you see here, the world figures for 2022, the growth rate is 3.4%, and for 2023, the growth rate is 2.9%. Compare that to India, we are growing at a much faster pace, much higher than the global average, which shows that India is a bright spot. And we also saw what are the reasons why India is very successful in achieving such a good growth rate. Alright, now we will see some background information about IMF. IMF has 190 member countries. So the main aim of IMF is to foster stability and enable monetary cooperation. So how does it foster stability? It will help the countries to face any balance of payment disequilibrium. If the country doesn't have enough dollars to cover their international payments, then IMF will cover that and help the country to become stable, and on return for that they will impose some conditions. Like in 1991, India also faced a balance of payment crisis. At that time, we sought help from IMF only, and IMF asked for liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms from India. So this affected India's stability, and now we don't have such a crisis because of these liberalization, privatization and globalization. Alright. So this IMF as an institution was formed in Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. Even another institution was formed as a result of Bretton Woods Conference, that is World Bank. This World Bank and IMF, they are both called as Bretton Woods twins because they were formed as a result of Bretton Woods Conference. And IMF has something called as special drawing rights. So this topic is very important from prelims perspective. That is why I am covering this topic. So basically, this SDR, it is not a currency. It is not a currency. It is just a unit of account. So one SDR is equal to so many dollars. It is equal to some amount of dollars. How it is calculated? It is calculated based on the value of US dollar, euro, Japanese yen, pound sterling and Chinese renminbi. So all these are the currencies in the basket, and based on their values only SDR is calculated. So if we take euro, how much is it equivalent in dollars? How much one yen is equivalent in dollars? Like that they would calculate, and the resulting number would be the value of one SDR. And each country has a quota in IMF, and this quota is denominated or it is expressed in the form of SDR. So if we have a certain quota, we have a certain claim to currency held by IMF member countries. So if we have, so India has a certain quota of SDR, and if we are in shortage of dollars, so we can claim that SDR from IMF. And say for example, we have some units of SDR and we go with those units of SDR to a country like France, say for example. Now France will get this FDR and it will give India dollars, by which we will be able to finance our imports. Okay, so this SDR is just a unit of account. It is not actually a currency, but in practice it is kind of used like a currency, but it is not a currency. That sort of clarity must be there. And this SDR is dependent on the quotas, and also a member's voting power, an IMF member's voting power is also related to the quotas. In IMF, the voting power, the quota is highest for US. Then other countries like UK and all come. Okay, so that is about SDR, that is about IMF. Moving on to the next article of the day, it is about biodiversity. The authors are saying that India can become a biodiversity champion. Now, why this article has come? It is because we have CBD, that is the Convention on Biological Diversity, that is CBD. So, UN Biodiversity Conference, it is the annual convention of this Convention on Biological Diversity. Their annual conference was held in December 2022 in Montreal, Canada, and there was a 30 cross 30 pledge. This is very important for prelims perspective. In prelims, there might be a question asking what is 30 cross 30 pledge. So the aim of this pledge is to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by conserving 30% of world's land and 30% of world's oceans by the year 2030. So that is why it is called as 30 cross 30 pledge. And why is India very important in this aspect? Because India has 17% of human population and 17% of global area in biodiversity hotspots. So hotspots are the locations in the world where the biodiversity is extremely high and they are very important for conservation. So India has certain hotspots. We know that, right? Western Ghat, it is one of the hotspot. Then Himalayas and Purvanchal, that is the Northeast Himalayas, and Andaman and Nicobar Island. So these are all the three hotspots present in India, and 17% of global area in biodiversity hotspots is there in India. So in regards to conservation of biodiversity, what initiatives were taken by the government of India? There has been a green growth initiative, and under that there are several components. We will see these components one by one. So first thing is National Mission for a Green India. It is to increase the forest cover, especially on degraded lands, and protect existing forested lands. This is also important from prelims perspective. There can be a question on National Mission for a Green India. Though this mission began somewhere around 2008, this is still important, so kindly go through that. Next one is Green Credit Program. It is to incentivize environmentally sustainable and responsive actions by companies, individuals as well as local bodies. That is about Green Credit Program. Some credits will be awarded to these institutions and individuals. Then Mishti Program. What is it? Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitats and Tangible Incomes. That is the Mishti Program. And then PM Pranam Program. This is also important from prelims perspective. It is Prime Minister Program for Restoration, Awareness, Nourishment and Amelioration of Mother Earth. So it is basically related to reducing inputs of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. So if we are reducing synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, we are making our agriculture sustainable. That is about PM Pranam. And then we have finally the Amrit Dharohar scheme. It is to encourage optimal use of wetlands. So here there is explicit mention of enhancing biodiversity, carbon stock, ecotourism. So this is a very holistic program. Under the Green Growth Initiative, we have first thing is the Green India Mission. Second is the Green Credit Program. Third one is the Mishti Program. Fourth one is PM Pranam Program. And fifth one is the Amrit Dharohar scheme. So these all, they comprise the Green Growth Initiative. Green Growth Initiative. So the authors of this article, they are saying that these initiatives should be based on science. There must be a evidence-based implementation. On the ground, what effect it is creating, what can be the corrections made, like that it should be a evidence-based implementation. And then there should be monitoring. Monitoring is not only essential for success but also for documentation purposes. Only if we are documenting a particular scheme, if it is successful, we can replicate in other places. And we should also use modern concepts of sustainability and valuation of ecosystem. So valuation these days, it is not only in monetary terms, it is also in terms of ecosystem services. Ecosystem service. So if there is a forest, we are not just counting the wood in the forest. Because of this forest, we also get water conservation, right? We also get biodiversity. It also houses wildlife. So these are all the ecosystem services. So it is not just counted in terms of the value of the timber. So these kinds of modern concepts for valuation of ecosystem must be used. That is what it means when we talk about science-based implementation. And in case of conservation of wetlands, so basically the focus should be on reduction of water use. If we are overusing or over extracting water or groundwater, the wetlands would not be sustainable. So in that case, less water intensive crops can be used. And in urban areas, we can use water recycling investments. So like grey water is recycled, that is the bath water and all, wash water, these things are recycled. Blue-green infrastructure means blue indicates water, green indicates the green areas like parks, etc. So if we are implementing blue-green infrastructure, it will be very instrumental in recycling of urban areas. These are some suggestions related to conservation of wetlands. And in case of Green India Mission, the focus should not be just tree plantation. This is a very narrow focus, right? Instead, the focus should be ecological restoration, which is a much more broader term than tree plantation. And site selection should be like, we have to choose the fringe areas or a connecting area. Say for example, there is a forest, okay, there is a forest and there is a road that is passing through that forest. Now there is a fragmentation of habitat. So if we are going to implement Green India Mission, there can be a ecological bridge. So in that case, we can implement the Green India Mission. That is one example for site selection. And the choice of species, we should not go for unscientific plantation. Like for example, pine trees were planted in India, but pine, it over extracts groundwater. So the kind of Green India Mission tree plantation we go, it should not be unscientific. The choice of species should also be prudent. And one more thing, we have to involve the local communities, local people, nomadic people, because they have certain traditional knowledge and practices which can be implemented, and it will give excellent results because they have been practicing for decades. So these are all the suggestions given in this regard. And there is National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Wellbeing. This is also important from prelims perspective. Okay, so here it seeks to harness the power of interdisciplinary knowledge for greening India as well as the economy, to restore and enrich our natural capital for the well-being of our people, and to position India as leader in applied biodiversity science, because we have 17% of biodiversity hotspots, area under biodiversity hotspots. So this is what is our natural capital. So we have to restore, enrich, and from that we can extract biodiversity sciences. We can study our herbs, species, and from there we can also gain economic value. We can also do conservation. So in that regard, National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Wellbeing is a very comprehensive mission. Okay, for the purposes of this article, the important missions have been already discussed. You kindly go through. Now we will go to the next article. It is about the significance of findings in Keeladi. So this Keeladi excavation, it happened in 2015. So where is Keeladi? Keeladi is in Tamil Nadu, in the banks of river Vaigai. Okay. So for our geography prelims perspective, this Vaigai river originates in Varushanad Hills. So note it down. It is very useful for prelims perspective. They can ask, where was Keeladi found? The banks of which river? So if they considered this river to be important, they will ask its origin. Alright. Now, in 2015, Keeladi excavation started and it proved that there was an urban civilization during Sangam age. So we know Indus Valley civilization, it was an urban civilization. Similarly, the excavation proved that there was an urban civilization during Sangam age. Why and how we will see in this article. So the period for Sangam age, it is from 300 BC to 300 CE. Alright. But through the Keeladi findings, they are saying that these artifacts which were found in Keeladi, they date back to 600 BC. So even in 2015, a research from Archaeological Survey of India, that is ASI, it even pushed the period of Sangam age to 800 BC. So today we have this notion that Sangam age was from 300 BC to 300 CE, but this research is pushing it even backwards, even up till 800 BC. So ASI is Archaeological Survey of India. Okay, so what are the links to Indus Valley? Like we have Indus Valley civilization. This is called as Vaigai Valley civilization because Keeladi is in the banks of river Vaigai. And this place, Keeladi, it is almost 15 kilometers south of the city of Madurai. This also you remember for prelims perspective, but between this Vaigai Valley civilization and Indus Valley civilization, there is a 1000-year gap, and this gap is filled with Iron Age material in South India. So after IVC, there was Iron Age in North India. Similarly, there is a gap of 1000 years between these two civilizations, and it is filled with Iron Age. That is what these findings say. And Keeladi has all characteristics of urban civilization. What does that mean? Like Indus Valley, you remember that there were brick structures. Similarly, Keeladi also has brick structures. There are evidences of internal as well as external trade. There were luxury items. Only in cities we consume luxury items even today, right? In villages, it is mostly subsistence based. If there are luxury items, it is a strong indicator of an urban civilization. So what has been unearthed? So there were 8 rounds of excavations and 18,000 artifacts were unearthed. There was pottery, and in this pot sherds, the pieces of pottery, there was inscription in Tamil Brahmi. And the presence of spindle whorls and copper needle, it proves that there was a weaving industry. There were gold ornaments, semi-precious stones, copper articles, ivory bangles. It shows how much culturally rich and prosperous Keeladi people were. So these were the artifacts that were unearthed, but there has been a controversy surrounding it. So in the third, we also already saw that there were 8 rounds of digging, and in the third round of digging, there were some findings which indicated possible link with IVC, and the central government had restricted the excavation only till 400 meter, and there are allegations just that it is just a random number. Why it has been restricted to 400 meter? Is it an attempt to play down the excavation findings? This has been the controversy, and consequently a case was filed in the Madras High Court, and Tamil Nadu State Archaeological Department was ordered to carry out further excavations. This part is not that important, but this particular news item is in news because of this controversy. So in that angle, we have to be very careful in studying about Sangam age and Indus Valley civilization, and even findings in Kiradi itself. So these topics are very important for prelims perspective, because this has been in news for quite some time. Next news, it is about Dickinsonia fossil. So basically 2020 this fossil was found out in Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh. Now it is being said that it was not really a Dickinsonia fossil, it is just a beehive. What is it? So we will see. So in Bhimbetka's rock shelters, there was a fossil of an extinct species called as Dickinsonia. It is now extinct, and if the fossil of this animal is found, it shows the status of evolution. That way it is very important in paleontological findings. So 2020, what happened was there was a chance finding of a 44 centimeter wide fossil of Dickinsonia, and this animal, it lived at least 538 million years ago, and it was found in a cave in Bhimbetka. So if you see this, so this is oval in shape, okay, and there is a central line and there are lines like this. This is the shape, it's almost leaf like. So it is circular or oval in shape. It is somewhat flat with rib-like structures radiating from a central column. So this sort of fossil was found, and the researchers thought that it was a fossil of Dickinsonia, but later it was found that it was just an impression which resulted from decay of a beehive. A bee has constructed a beehive. Once it decays, it falls off, and because of it, an impression was created. That is what it is, and it is not Dickinsonia. That is what is the latest finding. So ultimately, the verdict is that it is not a Dickinsonia fossil. So this animal is the Dickinsonia. So you can see the shape, and as per this shape only, the fossil is also found, but this is not the fossil, it is a remnant of a beehive. Okay, so what is Dickinsonia sometimes found in news is what? Like that they can ask question in prelims. So this article is important for prelims perspective. Okay, final article of the day is about rupee trade. Okay, so the banks which are indulging in international trade settlement, they have lack of clarity on rupee trade. So what happened was, in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia was imposed with sanctions. Okay, so how do we trade with Russia then? If we are trading with Russia, India would also get sanctioned. We can't use US dollars in that case. So RBI devised the rupee settlement mechanism so that we can have trade relations with countries which get sanctioned. It's not only Russia, it applies to countries like Iran, North Korea, etc. So if we are using this kind of system, we are also protected from sanctions. But what happens is, the banks which have any dealings with the US, so the banks were very much afraid of sanctions, and so as a result of it, they didn't issue e-bank realization certificate. So once an export transaction has to be completed, the bank should issue e-bank realization certificate. It marks the closure of an export transaction. But banks were very much afraid of US sanctions. So they were not taking up this rupee-based trade very seriously. They are not implementing it with full force, and that has been a gripe of the exporters. Okay, so this is a news. For this, we have to have some kind of analysis about rupee-based trade. Why we need a rupee-based trade? So the IMF economist, we are very much aware of her, Geeta Gopinath. So what she said was, international trade has a dominant currency paradigm. That is, international trade majorly happens on dollars. So this is the dominant currency in the world. So what happens? Depending upon dollar stability, whatever is happening in US economy, it also affects Indian currency because of the exchange rate. Why we need to convert rupees into dollars and vice versa? Because of this dominant currency paradigm. But instead, if we are trading in rupee, this is challenged. So in order to challenge that, rupee-based trade is important. And it relieves pressure on India's dollar reserves. India's dollar reserves will not get depleted if we are indulging in rupee-based trade. And Indian exporters can collect advance payments in Indian rupees from overseas clients. So how do they do that? There is something called as a nostro account. Okay, so this overseas clients, they will open a nostro account in Indian banks, and through this there is a rupee-based transaction that is facilitated, and our exporters can collect advance payments. That will also help them in investing in their business, right? And the next thing is long-term influence on regional nations. So if we are fostering rupee-based trade, our neighboring countries like Sri Lanka, which is also undergoing economic crisis, we have Bhutan. Bhutan already trades in rupees only. We have country like Bangladesh. So these regional countries, they will also be encouraged to take up rupee-based trade. And it also reduces India's trade deficit. If we are not buying Russian oil in the market, if we are going to buy oil, it would be significantly costly. Then what happens? India's import bill would increase if we are not buying Russian oil. So if the import bill increases, it will lead to increase of trade deficit. Okay, so in order to prevent this also, we need to implement rupee-based trade. So this is the news. Banks are very cautious to take up rupee-based trade, but there needs to be clarity on it, because overall for the country, rupee-based trade is very, very useful. Now we'll discuss some questions. So this particular question was asked in 2019 prelims. The word Denisovan is sometimes mentioned in media in reference to A, fossils of a kind of dinosaurs, B, an early human species, C, a cave system found in northeast India, D, a geological period in the history of Indian subcontinent. Answer is B. So Denisovans, they were short-heighted humans. Alright, so that is the end of our discussion. Follow us on all these social media channels. Thank you.